September 16, 1928.
And it's been called the Forgotten Hurricane. It has been forgotten, and there was a really deliberate effort to forget about it.
You could feel the sides of the boat going this way and the roof going that way.
We all began to lean forward like that, you know.
The blacks were put in one section, and the whites were put in another section.
They brought them in and buried them in a long trench. That's all you could do.
From the Weather Channel, this is Storm Stories with meteorologist Jim Cantore.
Late summer 1928. It's planting season in South Bay, Florida, a mostly white farming community 40 miles west of Palm Beach. The sleepy town of 400 lies on the southern shore of Lake Okeechobee. Outside of the Great Lakes, it's the largest freshwater lake in the continental U.S. Nearly 4,000 black migrant workers live in the surrounding area, forming a separate community. 51-year-old Captain Edward E. Forbes has South Bay's only telephone. On the afternoon of Sunday, September 16th, its shrill ring pierces the stillness. A voice from the neighboring town of Belle Glade crackles over the receiver. The outer edge of a hurricane has hit the Florida coast 40 miles to the east. Forbes immediately alerts the townspeople.
We didn't know how bad it was or anything, but he asked different people to go and spread the word that there was a hurricane coming.
Captain Forbes has been in this situation before. Just 2 years earlier, another hurricane blew across the 730-square-mile lake. The 5-foot mud dike along the southern and eastern shores could not withstand the winds. The dike collapsed, sending a wall of water into surrounding lakeshore towns. As many as 300 people drowned. Now, Forbes isn't taking any chances. He tells his pregnant daughter, 23-year-old Alice Forbes Mutchler, to bring her 7-month-old baby, Marion, to the only safe spot in town, the local barge.
My father, he was a boatman, and he had been around boats for years, and he knew how to handle them, and he knew that's the only thing that was going to float was a boat.
The barge is moored in the North New River Canal, a man-made offshoot of the Okeechobee that is protected by locks. Captain Forbes, Alice, and the rest of the family take cover there. Nearly 200 other white townspeople join them. The black migrant workers are left to fend for themselves.
Most of the people in the city were on a boat. It's the ones who were in outlying areas that didn't get on.
The hurricane's awesome power is taking the rest of South Florida by surprise. For 4 days, it has traveled northwest across the Caribbean and the Atlantic, maintaining its intensity over the warm waters. Its massive winds, at times sustained at 155 miles an hour, have left more than 1,500 dead in the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Bahamas. Those winds also destroyed the early warning system that would normally alert the U.S.
The Weather Bureau had what they call weather watchers. These were people that were on the islands, on Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Bahamas, that basically just radioed in the daily weather reports. When the hurricane came through, it knocked down these towers. So the Weather Bureau was actually blinded.
About 5 miles from South Bay, in an even smaller community called Sebring Farms, the weekend newspaper issues a warning about the killer hurricane. But an article on the same page dismisses the threat.
Another column on the bottom of the same front page, it said, "Hurricane to Miss Florida." And this was because the editors were getting different information.
14-year-old Vernie Boots is a relative of Captain Forbes and Alice. One day earlier, he and his family evacuated their home just 200 yards from the lake and took cover on a boat in South Bay. When the hurricane didn't show, they packed up and returned to Sebring Farms.
Back then, forecasts were pretty lousy, and as far as that goes, why, you just about had to use your own judgment.
Now it's late Sunday afternoon. Vernie and his three brothers are in their yard, playing with propellers mounted on sticks. As the wind picks up, the propellers start spinning like crazy.
And the propellers spun so fast that they started smoking.
My gosh, it got so we couldn't hardly get one up and running until it just burned a hole right through it.
And Vernie then knew that this was going to be quite a powerful wind.
40 miles east, in the coastal city of West Palm Beach, 11-year-old Preston Tillman is also playing outside. Then the clouds start moving in.
Around about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, it starts getting a little bit windier. And there was sort of a bit of rain matched in with the wind, a little more than it had been.
Preston lives near the railroad tracks in a segregated area called Colored Town. Theirs is a poor neighborhood made up of cheaply constructed small wooden houses. The Tillman house is one of the largest and sturdiest, so dozens of people take shelter inside.
There were some other persons who had discounted the hurricane, did not think that they should go to a safer place. They didn't think it was going to be much, and so they did not come. But then about 6:30 or 7, it got a little bit harder, and they said, let us get in. And everyone brought something to eat.
For Preston and his friends, the hurricane is less interesting than the food. While a minister leads a prayer for safety, the boys eye the feast.
We weren't watching them pray. We didn't have our eyes closed. We were looking at thinking about what are we going to get on our plates.
Just before the minister finishes his prayer, a crash tears through the quiet. The hurricane has made landfall, and it's ripping the roof off the house. The strongest part, the eye wall, hits Palm Beach about 3 miles from Colored Town. Winds scream at 150 miles an hour. Preston's father orders everyone to flee outside to the only concrete building in the neighborhood, the city garbage incinerator.
The wind was moving in a kind of a whirling way.
The group of 50 or so huddles in 2s and 3s as they claw their way to the incinerator.
Nobody stood up like this because if you stood erect, the wind would have a chance of blowing you back.
The trip is uphill, the distance of 3 blocks. It's almost impossible for the young and very old, but no one gives up.
Sometimes you make one step forward and they blow you back like that, but that was encouragement. Go, oh, come on, let's go. Everybody was encouraging you, so you couldn't stop it.
40 miles away in South Bay, the outer bands of the hurricane have invaded the Lake Okeechobee region. On a crowded barge at the edge of the lake, a pregnant Alice Forbes Mutchler clings to her 7-month-old baby.
The noise, of course, was a terrible rumble. You could feel the sides of the boat going this way and the roof going that way.
The locks of the canal are useless. Water is pouring over them, pounding the deck of the rolling barge.
There's a couple ministers on board. They began singing dirges and praying, thinking this was it, that they were going to sink. This was the end of their lives.
Water pools on the floor. Captain Forbes thinks it's only rain, but when he goes below deck, he realizes the barge is sinking.
He landed in about waist deep of water, and they knew they were in serious problems.
5 miles away on Sebring Farms, Vernie Boots and his brothers have fled indoors. As the lake floods, the water rises rapidly over the porch into the house. The Boots family is forced to escape to a neighbor's house, wading through water that already reaches their knees.
I was scared, you know, but it was exciting too because of the age I was, I guess. But yeah, I was scared. I knew it was bad.
When they get to the house, they find 15 white neighbors and 42 local black migrant workers jammed inside.
There's safety in numbers. There's 63 people there, so they really feel safe. And then the water starts coming in under the door, and it covers the floor and starts working its way slowly up the wall.
There is nowhere left to run, nowhere to find safety, and the hurricane is about to unleash even more force upon South Florida. Sebring Farms' segregated communities now have something terrible in common. They're about to be fighting for their lives in one of the worst hurricanes this country has ever seen. That's next, when Storm Stories returns. September 16th, 1928, South Florida is being hammered by a Category 4 hurricane. Winds race at 150 miles an hour, creating an 18-foot storm surge from the Atlantic Ocean. 11-year-old Preston Tillman and his family have escaped their disintegrating house and taken refuge in the West Palm Beach incinerator.
Just to open an incinerator, that's all, where the dump trucks would come in and dump in their trash and garbage and everything.
Preston looks around to see who is there and what he can do to help.
It's not a time to be afraid, it's time to act. It's a time for action.
About 40 miles west, Alice Forbes Mutchler is fighting her own fears. The pregnant woman has been standing for hours in the cramped quarters of a work barge. She holds her infant daughter in the grim darkness while the winds howl outside.
You don't think of anything, only getting safe, and you really don't have much feeling.
The rest of Alice's family, including her father, Captain Edward E. Forbes, is in another part of the boat. They were separated during the chaotic boarding process. Alice has no idea that her husband and father are working furiously to keep the barge from sinking.
They had to start bailing. They got all these pots that they could, and they had like a line of people bailing water if they could.
Outside the barge, the town of South Bay is being crushed. The 5-foot-high dike cannot hold back the raging waters of Lake Okeechobee. Entire houses and hundreds of people are carried off in the flood. Many of the houses nearly collide with the barge. Huddled inside, Alice can't see the deadly debris.
You didn't realize, really, how terrible it was. And if we had seen all the debris coming at us, it would have scared us to death. It wasn't like kindling going this way and that. It was whole houses that was coming down at you.
A few miles away at Sebring Farms, Vernie Boots, his family, and dozens of white farmers and black migrant workers are trapped in a neighbor's house. It's rapidly filling with water from Lake Okeechobee.
We stayed down on the ground floor for a while, but the water was beginning to rise.
The group scurries from room to room, desperately seeking higher ground.
They ran into the bedroom. They took a bed out and put it in the middle of the floor. They threw a dresser drawer onto the bed, opened up the attic, and they started passing up the women and the children first through the attic, and then the men lifted themselves up.
Vernie is 14 years old and considered a man. He is one of the last into the attic.
We were near a window going into the attic, and the house, shook real bad, and I stuck my hand out like that, and I hit this piece of glass that had been broken,
It's just as he pulls himself up the attic and sits down, he could actually see the water about 2 feet, actually touching his feet by this time.
I could touch the water with my foot sitting on a rafter in the ceiling of the building. That's how high the water got.
That 12-foot-high surge of water is slamming against the house, ripping it off the ground.
It was actually lifted off its foundation and was being carried by the storm surge.
That's what was a disaster. The building starting to float.
As the building moves with the current, its 63 prisoners try to escape by chopping a hole through the roof. Then, the house comes to a crashing halt. It has hit a 3-foot pile of dirt being used to construct a local road. The house is smashed against the roadbed again and again.
It bounced back, I think, about 3 times and came all to pieces. And I say all to pieces, yeah.
Vernie and everybody else were thrown into the dark water. Vernie found himself on the surface of the water. He doesn't know how he got on there.
The wind was blowing near 100 miles an hour. And of course you couldn't hear anything on account of the wind.
There's 5-foot waves just slamming at him. There's wood, there's everything popping up all around him. But he could actually see the roof of the house actually sinking below the surface. And in that roof, he could see lights of people's flashlights on, trying to find their way out.
Vernie, his 3 brothers, and his parents struggle to stay together in the swirling waters.
See, my mom couldn't swim, and my dad's health was bad.
The last thing Vernie Boots said he heard his mother say says, "We got to keep the children together."
That's exactly right. Well, we did continue to stick together.
But the hurricane is too strong. By 10:30 p.m., Vernie loses sight of his parents and brothers in the starless night. He grabs the only wood he can find, a piece of the ceiling. The winds and driving rain make it difficult to hold on.
And the darn piece of ceiling was turning over, and so the smooth side was up. And by virtue of that, then I had to go around, keep my head into the wind, and the waves, or I'd have got my butt washed off. See, that's exactly what it amounted to.
Vernie clings to the wood for hours and waits for dawn. When light first breaks, he lifts his head. The Category 4 hurricane has moved northwest, leaving behind 10 inches of rain and an empty horizon.
He actually thought he might be in Lake Okeechobee, in the middle of Lake Okeechobee, because he could see nothing. You know, I just looked around, it was all water everywhere.
Vernie is totally alone. His family is nowhere in sight. September 17th, 1928. It's dawn in south central Florida, near the southern shore of Lake Okeechobee. 14-year-old Vernie Boots is clinging to part of the ceiling of a demolished house. A Category 4 hurricane has carried him 3 miles into the Everglades. He thinks he's the only survivor until he hears someone moaning.
He says, geez, it's his brother Willie. His brother Willie's on the other piece.
He's on part of the ceiling there. That was Willie.
Using the sun for direction, the boys wade back to what's left of Sebring Farms. There they learn that half of their family has perished.
My mom, we knew, was gone, and my dad was gone. And then I had a brother just younger than me, and he was gone.
A few miles east in South Bay, Alice Forbes Mutchler has survived a harrowing night on a crowded barge.
We were just happy that everybody was there. You didn't even think about what you lost. It was gone, and that was it.
Hundreds of townspeople and migrant workers who didn't take cover in the barge are dead. They have been swept away into the Everglades. In West Palm Beach, 11-year-old Preston Tillman and his neighbors emerge from the shelter of a concrete incinerator. Colored Town and the rest of the city are destroyed.
Well, all around you saw where houses were blown across the street. I later on found that's the way it looks when I fought the war over there in North Africa and Italy. It looked just like that.
In the next few days, the people of South Florida begin the slow process of recovery. The nation focuses on the damage done to larger towns like West Palm Beach. It isn't until the bodies start arriving from the Everglades that anyone knows the tragedy of Lake Okeechobee.
And a lot of bodies that were actually covered during the hurricane itself began to pop up on the surface.
The official death count is eventually placed at 1,836, making it the second deadliest hurricane in U.S. history. Yet even this number is low. The bodies of many black migrant workers are never accounted for.
They don't really give much attention to this hurricane because it didn't kill a lot of white people. It did kill a lot of black people.
If you add up all the graves from the hurricane of '28, the number is far greater than the official death toll. We'll tell you what that number is when Storm Stories returns. The official death toll for the hurricane of 1928 is 1,830. But if you add up all the graves, that number is closer to 2,500. And some historians think even that estimate is low. Not only were many migrant workers unaccounted for, communication was nearly obliterated, and a struggling Florida government ran out of money and had to call off the search in a matter of weeks. For Storm Stories, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori. Your local forecast is next.